Good afternoon, everybody. I just wanted to briefly respond to the governor's press conference and his May revision of this morning. I think the governor has laid out, once again, the only credible framework for achieving a long-term, emphasis on long-term, resolution to California's budget challenges. It really is not that fundamentally different from what he has presented in the past. And it, in the end, if passed, would achieve the same relative balance between deep and difficult cuts and the revenue to ensure that the cuts, especially to education and to public safety, are no deeper than they have to be. And so I'm encouraged. For the Senate's part, we're very clear. We are going to convene our budget subcommittees. We are going to analyze this quickly. We are going to continue and expedite our discussions and negotiations with the Senate Republicans that are willing to be part of the solution, and we are going to get to our floor. Our goal is to get to our floor well before June the 15th and get this done. We're on a very fast track. We don't have to start from scratch. A lot of the work in terms of analysis, but also negotiation, has been done in the first part of the year. Senator Leno's joining me here. And we intend to finish. Once again, I'll conclude by saying this. I think the key difference between what the governor proposed and what we embrace here, and, for example, what the Assembly Republicans put out late last week, is that we are focused on a long-term solution to California's budget challenges. We aren't interested in gimmicks or papering over the deficit, or hoping we just get through the year and then praying for an even faster economic recovery. There's good news over the last several weeks in terms of revenue increases, but it doesn't change the fundamental nature of the challenge we face. So let's finish our work.
Senator, do you think it's a mistake for the governor not to outline a plan B or a plan C if, for example, the tax extension does not bear fruit?
I don't think it was a mistake, because I think we all know essentially what Plan B is. And he did speak to some of it. It would be a $5 billion plus cut to public education. And we know that it would be another $5 billion of cuts to public safety, higher education, other vital public services. The numbers do not lie. The numbers do not lie.
Just to put a point on that, he did spell out in about 3 pages what Senator Steinberg just said. And specifically, given that I think he reduced it from about $5.9 billion to about $5.4 billion of the tax extension, specifically VLF, goes specifically to public safety. So without that, that's a loss to public safety. And then, of course, about the other $5 billion probably will hit K through 12. So it should be clear to everyone, and we've had our budget committee hearings over the past few weeks specifically to spell out what the likely hits would be if the extension of the taxes do not occur. And now, of course, we're talking about a $10 billion problem as opposed to a $15 billion problem, but it's still a significant problem without the revenue.
Senator, you said the numbers don't lie, but the numbers needed to pass these tax extensions haven't changed from March. So how do you anticipate getting the votes in the chamber?
Well, again, I don't think we start from scratch. I think there were several Senate Republicans that indicated publicly, and of course have indicated privately, that they want to get this done. And they don't want to see an all-cuts approach. We know what the issues of negotiation are. Again, we're not starting from scratch when it comes to those well-identified issues, whether it be pensions or rainy day funds. And we now just need to pick up where we left off and get this done. Of course, it's going to depend upon enough Republicans to be part of governing and to be part of the solution. And given that this pathway is the only viable pathway. There's only one option, and that is to succeed.
How much harder is it to get the long-term changes done if you've got this $6 billion in revenue coming in and the Republicans looking at it and saying, look, you've got this and that?
You know, the Republicans ought to read at least some of John Boehner's talking points. Because the Republicans in Washington are certainly, and I realize it's a little dangerous to quote Mr. Boehner here, but the Republicans in Washington are focused on they say they're focused on long-term deficit reduction. Well, if you look at the Assembly Republican plan, which Senate Republicans have spoken favorably about, there are holes a mile deep in terms of the long-term deficits, because all they use are one-time gimmicks. The irony, and dare I say the hypocrisy, of saying for months that there should not be an election on Governor Brown's plan, and then to call for an election to repeal Proposition 63 and Proposition 10, I think strike most objective observers as odd.
The Assembly Republican proposal is really a return to the failed Schwarzenegger fiscal program. It just borrows and borrows. It ignores the long-term debt that we've accumulated over the past recent years. That's exactly what the governor wants to address.
Senator Wolf said that you wanted to go ahead with these tax extensions without votes to do it. The governor hasn't proposed that. I want you to respond to that, and then how concerned are you about these not passing?
Well, I think it is positive that the governor did not specify an election date in his May revise. And you know, consistent with what we have said all along, if there has to be an election, it ought to be as far off as is reasonably possible. The motive being very simple. Schools and other public services deserve at least a year of funding stability. And 2012, to me, in the normal election cycle, would be an appropriate time to have an election if an election is necessary. I understand the election issue because it's not just the governor's pledge, but if we are going to negotiate some of these reforms, I understand that the Republicans would not want to vote for 4 or 5 years of tax extensions and then hope that the reforms pass on a subsequent ballot. I understand that. But that if there has to be an election, in my view, it ought to be 2012.
The governor was talking about this fall, though.
2012.
The governor was talking about, when he said as soon as possible, that hopefully by this fall. You're saying that's just not feasible?
2012 is very soon. It's you know, I think he, again, the key point is he did not specify in his May revise nor in his public comments a specific election date. So I believe it's a matter that's subject to discussion and negotiation.
How complicating a factor is it that now you're going to have to get Republicans to actually vote for these taxes as opposed to just asking the voters to vote for them? You might have to have them approve them first and then put them on the ballot.
I think that the Republicans who have engaged in discussions and continue to do understand that. The facts on the ground have changed a little bit, and I don't think that should hold us up.
Yeah, I mean, do you think the fact, the governor did seem fairly insistent on the idea that he still wants an affirmation by voters. I mean, there are a number of Democratic constituency groups who said, we don't need that. Would you have trouble getting your own caucus to support a plan that includes a scheduled vote?
Certainly, again, I think if an election is necessary, 2012 is the right time frame for that election. And I think that our caucus will support a comprehensive solution that provides the best opportunity for long-term revenue and a long-term fix to our budget challenges.
So you're envisioning a situation where the taxes are approved and actually raised before the vote is taken by the people?
Well, that's what the governor has proposed anyways. It's just a matter of degree. You know, let's just assume for the sake of argument that there were a fall 2011 election. It's not even in for a dime, in for a dollar. It's in for a quarter, in for a dollar. I mean, if an election were held 3 months, for example, into the fiscal year, under my 2012 suggestion, or anything in the fall, the same vote needs to be taken,
So you
essentially.
think people might get comfortable with it, with a tax increase after a couple of months of experiencing it and saying, hey, it's not much different?
You know, here's
this
what,
way than the other
but
way?
let me make that statement now very definitively. The tax extensions that are being talked about now are existing taxes. We're not talking about a tax increase here. Maybe technically we are after June the 30th because those tax extensions would go off, but in terms of what the people are paying now, that's really the beauty of the governor's proposal here. He's suggesting that people just continue to pay what they're paying now, and by the way, he's made it a little bit better because he's taken off the personal income tax for the 2011 year.
And that's the only one that would have been a tax extension.
That's correct.
So this can honestly be stated. We take this vote before July 1st. These are indeed tax extensions of current tax rates.
So you're basically saying, you know, the legislature would do the vote now, and then it would be ratified by the people 8-9 months, perhaps 8-9 months or longer into the next fiscal year. Whatever that vote may be.
I think we look at the, you know, my suggestion, you know, we all have our suggestions and positions here. I'd say 2000, you know, in the normal 2012 election cycle.
So potentially next June. Or you haven't decided when there's going to be an election in 2012 yet.
Well, that's true. I wasn't thinking March.
Okay.
I have an off-topic question. If anybody else wants to ask a budget question, go ahead.
Let me ask you a budget question. June 15th, you get docked on your pay. After June 15th, you have got an adopted budget. Have you got an adopted budget now? You're not arguing at that point, would you?
No, our point is, well, we did pass the budget in March. It's sitting at the desk, but that isn't what we are relying upon. We are going to get a complete budget done by June the 15th. That's our obligation to the people.
Your argument that if nothing happens between now and June 15th, that you shouldn't be docked for your
I must tell you, the pay issue, I know, of course, it matters to members who this is the way we make our living at this time in our lives. But that is not the primary motivation. The motivation is to get the people's business done by June the 15th, period. That's our obligation. Under Prop 25, you know, the voters have given us the majority power, albeit with some qualifications, given the revenue piece. And it's our job to get the budget done by June the 15th.
The question is, would it be your argument that you shouldn't have your pay docked after June 15th if nothing else happens?
I'm not making that argument because we're not going to allow that question to even come into play.
Senator, another key date in June is June the 10th, is when the redistricting commission is going to release its draft maps. Do you think that will be an important day in this process as you?
Might be good to get the budget done June 9th. I'm thinking.
Or better June 11th. I mean, that.
Well, I don't know. Well, but you don't know what the lines are going to be. We fully recognize that this is the first draft of the maps may be out in the middle of all this, and it's something that members, of course, are very interested in, appropriately so. But we got to get this budget done as quickly as possible, and you know, if we can get it done a week or so before June 15th, all the better.
There's about 5,500 state employees or positions set to be eliminated, probably some layoffs, probably affecting your Sacramento area district. But looking at it from a statewide picture, is that, in your mind, a fair reduction of the state workforce?
Well, I think that it is, and it is because it's combined with realignment. which will, create hopefully comparable jobs at the county level. That's where the 5,500 number comes in.
My off-topic question is about the legislature bill on allowing locals to raise taxes.
Oh, that's very much on topic.
And could you, I'm just doing it for another reporter.
Yes.
Just defend your bill, why do you need to have locals decide their own taxes?
Well, first of all, as we begin to move services closer to the people, it makes sense to give local governments the ability to do the same sorts of things that the state can do on the revenue side. But I've been very clear about this. There's both a substantive reason and a tactical reason to do this bill. The substantive reason is that if we do not get the state revenue here, then we have an obligation to schools, to our sheriffs, to our police chiefs, to give them every tool possible to get the money they need to fulfill their duties. And hopefully, the fact that this bill has led to the pot boiling a little bit more will help provide a resolution to do this statewide.
Do you think your members will vote those in the Browns Coast to act some of these commissions? The State Commission proposed several bills to the state goal have died this session already.
We will look at all of them, but certainly in the main, I think the members recognize that consolidating government and eliminating duplicative or unnecessary boards and commissions is something that the public expects. Sure, we'll look at them. We'll look at them on the merits, but I don't think we'll flinch.
So I want to understand the timing of your proposal regarding the taxes.
Hi.
So if the legislature were to approve taxes in June, and in 2012 voters were to decide against the taxes, would that then retroactively
No.
affect taxes?
No. Schools and public safety need and deserve funding stability for as long as possible. No.
So it would affect taxes going forward?
Correct. Remember, the governor's called for 5 years. So, thank you, everybody.